Welcome to my lecture on the knight fork. Now, knight fork is actually just a double attack. And let me just cover a double attack again. A double attack is a simultaneous attack of one piece against two of your opponent's pieces, also referred to as a fork. And I mentioned that the queen and knight are the most common. And in this lecture, I just want to specialize on the knight, because knight forks are tricky, or actually your opponent can find them very tricky, and they're a good tactical motif to use. The reason I'm concentrating on the knight is because the knight is the trickiest piece to learn to move. And in this position, white actually has a move where we can fork or double attack. And that move is moving the knight to here. When we move the knight to here, we're actually giving check, but we're also attacking two of our opponent's pieces. Okay, so and we're going to capture one of them. So that means the knight jumps in and attacks the king and the rook at the same time, and the opponent is going to lose the rook on the next move. Something like this. Okay, and then black would just recapture. Actually, this game is technically stalemate. So, I just want to cover some examples of the knight fork to give you some examples of how tricky this can be, and maybe some pointers of how to inflict a nice knight fork on your opponent and how to avoid them. So I set up this position to show you maybe how to avoid knight forks, and this will probably show you a good idea of how to create them or what to look for. And I always say, and don't worry, I've fallen victim to my own advice, usually during blitz games when it's going very quickly, but I try to keep this thought in the back of my mind, is that I know that in order for a knight to fork me, or in order to inflict a knight fork, that the pieces must be on the same color. Now, this may be, I don't know if this is an advanced concept, but if you think about it, the knight here is on white, and it's always going to be moving to a dark square. Okay, so I know that if I was ever going to be attacking two pieces at the same time, they would both have to be in dark squares. So sometimes when in blitz game, I'll move it, and if I know the knight's in the area, if I don't have time to calculate, I'm making a move within a second, I'll sort of keep in the back of my mind, hey, let's not put the pieces on the same color because I might get forked. What I mean by this is, let's say it was black's turn to move, and you just decided, well, I'll move my rook over here because it looks very threatening, But unfortunately, this falls to a knight fork of here, because now the knight can fork both of these pieces. Okay, and like I said, notice how black's pieces were both on the same color. Okay, let's say, black decided to move here. Well, once again, look at the principle of being on the same color. The knight just moves here, and then both the rooks get forked. And like I said in my previous lecture, since the knight is a piece of lesser value than the rooks, no matter what the rooks do, wherever this rook would move, let's say, the rook were to move here, and just say to threaten to capture the knight, at least, we're going to get a rook for our knight. So white's actually going to win material. Okay? So this is my key concept, that sometimes when I look for a fork, sometimes my opponent will move and I'll say, okay, both of them are on the same color. Taking back a move, I'll say, oh, do I have a fork? Can I fork somewhere? Okay. And sometimes knight forks are just, you gotta almost look 2 moves ahead. I hate to say that. My other piece of advice is you really gotta be looking just not one move ahead for the knight, but you got to be looking 2 moves ahead. We're going to be jumping 2 moves ahead. So, you know, I always say move 1, you know, the knight, let's say, for threatening type moves, it's going to move to one of these 2 squares, and then moving 2 moves ahead from each one of these. You know, these are now, you know, it's sort of second moves that are somewhat threatening. I'm just going to draw arrows from each one of these. Even here, you know, and then for this one it could be here. I know this starts to look very messy on the screen, but you can see how the knight gets to be a very tricky piece. Maybe I should have just said, you know, the knight, maybe I should have highlighted them in green for the first move, and then from each green square, you know, this possible second moves, you know, are starting to be these types of moves. I mean, hell, you know. So as you can see, the knight can cover is a very tricky piece, and that's the problem. You got to be looking 2 moves ahead. So that's one thing that maybe to cover in this simple position. Now let me show you another position. Okay, let's say it's white's turn to move in this position. Now you may be saying it doesn't look too good for white because both of the black pieces are lined up on the knight. So even if it's white's turn to move and it could protect the knight again, it would lose it by superior force, meaning if we were to move the queen, let's say that here, you know, black could still take, and we'd end up losing the knight. But actually, there's a fork in this position, and this is what I mean by this is sort of a motif or a setup, meaning what you're going to end up doing is setting up the pieces to where you can fork them, and this is about thinking ahead in chess of seeing a fork. Now, you could be saying, well, heck, you know, there's maybe a possibility of superior force by white by checking. You know, let's say, you know, or white cannot win this bishop by superior force. And I'm just saying this move, maybe you may say, you know, where I'm sort of now double attacking the bishop. But unfortunately that doesn't work because, well, it sort of works. I guess we could exchange off both pieces. Black could just recapture and recapture. And then we sort of just exchange off both pieces. That's possible. Okay, but white can actually win material in this position. And how is that possible? Well, there's actually a fork going on. And remember, I just showed you that fork before of here, where the king's being forked, and this piece is being forked. They say, well, the queen's just going to take, but we sort of did it in the wrong order. What you want to do is we'll take with the queen. Now this almost looks like we're sacrificing the queen because black's just going to take back, but no, it's not true. There's the fork. Now we're forking king and queen. Now black moves. Then we recapture. Notice that we won the bishop. Okay, so actually white won the bishop out of that entire exchange. So take. So this is actually us winning the bishop, if you believe it or not, even though it almost looks like we're giving up our queen. But when the queen takes back, we're able to fork and then win the piece back. So I recommend going over many basically tactical books and solving tactical puzzles. I can't go over a whole bunch of different examples. They're just as a time and a 10-minute lecture. That's why I recommend buying tactical books and reviewing those puzzles. Okay?